Hello fragrance lovers, back for more are you? Good, I'm glad to hear it. Welcome to another episode of Making Sense Make Sense, the podcast that is all about demystifying the wonderful world of fragrance. You'll find no snobbery, gatekeeping or BS here. Instead, we have fun, insightful and accessible conversations about scent with interesting industry people. I'm Thomas Dunkley and I'm your host. I like perfume and I can't stop talking about it, which, let's face it, is why we're all here. Today, I am most definitely talking to an interesting industry person. My guest is the wonderfully warm Nancy Meiland. Nancy has a really beautiful fragrance brand that takes inspiration from nature. Each of her perfumes brings a new twist to familiar materials, and she tells really beautiful stories through her scents. I first met Nancy last year at the Fragrance Foundation Awards, where Lupin Meadow, one of her fragrances, was shortlisted. She's also made a very brief appearance on the pod last spring during Barnes Fragrance Fair. Long-time listeners may remember that. Today we have a much longer chat, getting into the nitty-gritty of her origins in perfumery and how she transitioned from acting to perfume. We also talk at length about her wonderful new fragrance, Iris Nebula, which is a scent that really blew me away when it launched towards the end of last year. So let's just jump straight into that chat after a very brief word from our sponsors. This episode of Making Sense Make Sense is sponsored by Carium. Did you know that smell is the only one of our senses that doesn't have a specific language? To talk about the smells we experience, we must borrow from our other senses, relying on the language of texture, colour, sound, taste and emotion to describe what our noses experience. Carium's innovative AI technology puts language at the centre of the user experience. Using a large language model built with vast amounts of textural data, it maps how scents are described in language, coupling this with the customer's own word associations to guide them to unexpected fragrance matches. It's not just about AI, it's about immersive storytelling through scent, allowing customers to see, smell and feel fragrances in a way that connects to their memories and emotions. The Scent Sommelier uses language to deliver a precise personal recommendation that feels both scientific and emotional in 3 easy steps. 1. Customers select the type of fragrance they're searching for from a choice of up to 16 fragrances from a single brand or multiple brands. 2. They tap through a series of scent and word cues, and with each tap, AI adapts. And 3. The Scent Sommelier identifies their signature fragrance, all whilst the customer smells along in an interactive experience. Carium's The Scent Sommelier launched in the UK last summer and can be found in Selfridges on Oxford Street as part of the Famine counter, and also at the Richmond fragrance boutique Parfums La Danse. So why not pop in and see how the language of scent and Carium's innovative AI solution can guide you to discover a new fragrant love. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me on Making Sense Make Sense. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Super pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me. Thank you so much, Tom.
You're so welcome. This is actually technically your second appearance because you appeared very briefly last year during my Barnes Fragrance Fair episode. I'm not sure if you remember, but for like just
Correct.
about 3 minutes.
Yeah, at the end of I think it was in the middle of a really hectic day, wasn't it? And I was like, I gotta go.
Yes.
So we did it in like a nanosecond.
It was very busy.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you were manning your stall. And what I didn't want to do was take you away from your stall and stop you from selling your beautiful fragrances just to come talk to me. So we kept giving each other the eye across the room to find the right time. But it's a pleasure to have you in a long form episode where we can talk all about you and your work. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
What I'm really curious about, Nancy, is you're someone who lives, I would say, a fairly scented life. You are immersed in the world of scent and fragrance. When was the first time you remember consciously thinking about scent?
I think we all have a hot wire in the brain through that landing strip in the nose to very early memories. And I have quite a few, my grandfather particularly. In fact, a lot of people come into the shop referencing grandparents. I think I have a sort of potted theory that it's about a kind of emotional safety, and that somehow if you have emotional safety, your senses can kind of crank wide open. And I feel like that was what was happening when I was younger. So my grandfather, for example, and Sue Bois was in part inspired by this, but his wax jacket coming in out of the rain and just that feeling of safety. He was very much a kind of tree, what I would call a tree person. You just felt very safe around him. And then my gran, she had this incredible rose garden. And so I would just run around barefoot, but something about being barefoot and then burying my nose in these sort of dewy petaled roses just and the jamminess of them, but also the early morning dew, also an inspiration within the collection. So they've all found their ways, those really intrinsic memories, scent memories have found their ways into the collection. But I think initially it was that there have been really major turning points with one just from a smell where I've gone, oh, I didn't realize it could be like this. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize it could be like that. And you probably have a few like that as well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, definitely a few sort of crossroads moments where I just feel changed by the scent and that experience.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about that is not that have such beautiful scented memories, but how you're able to recall them so vividly and in such detail. Talking about the jamminess of the roses very specifically, it's so ingrained, isn't it?
I think it is. I think I am one of those sensorial people. I sort of navigate that way. It's all the things I love in life are kind of steered by the senses. So travel. I'm never more alive than when I'm travel or experiencing new cultures and, whether it's in a souk in Marrakesh or wherever it might be. But everything is such a fertile ground. And even just being on the bus in
Mm.
England is fertile ground, or the tube, you know, and I think that is key, is just remaining really open around things. I know that a lot of I've been very inspired by a lot of the big noses and the big fragrance houses, and they almost all of them describe, sort of a very open mind. Everything can be interesting on the nose.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a richly textured world around us for us to
Yeah,
pull from. And you
yeah.
got your start in perfumery working alongside perfumers such as Anastasia Brozler and Lynn Harris. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into the world of fragrance? What was that journey like for you?
Meeting Anastasia was a really benevolent moment for me. I was at a party and then I met her and we were just discussing the perfume world, and I was saying how much I enjoyed it. But I think she just knew instantly, oh, right, you could work with me. So she offered me a job pretty much on the spot, and I just left drama school. And I really needed a job where I could be in central London and ping off to all my auditions in my lunch hour. So that's what I was doing. I literally did it for that. I had no idea what I was going to. I just thought I'd be managing her diary and doing some very basic tasks. But it really wasn't that at all. And then it grew and grew and it snowballed, and it spiked my interest every day. And plus, she was a very generous mentor. And I've really experienced many of those, especially females, particularly in my pathway. And yeah, she was just like, right, I really think you could be good at this, I was like, okay, all right, going along with it, but not really making it front and center for quite a while, actually. It was sort of building steadily until I would notice what was literally under my nose.
And I'm fascinated by that, as starting out pursuing acting as your primary career. Perfume was just the thing that you were sort of doing to kind of keep yourself afloat. And
Yeah.
when you were doing when you were doing the acting, was that something that overlapped with the fragrant world? I know I've heard actors talking about how they use perfumes to kind of set the tone for their characters. They wear a particular one for every character they play. Did you find an overlap between the two worlds?
Definitely. And I had actually used scent for character development, and it is really powerful. And I've since worked with a few different actors on using perfume and notes to sort of bring them from one scene to another and kind of connect with them emotionally on a deeper level. And especially when around the small screen as well, it can be really powerful. So I already knew yeah, it was very helpful to kind of have the impetus of scent. Acting obviously is all about the inner journey, and perfume can really interlink with that and really sort of provoke memory and kind of help you to dive deeper into certain scenes. So I already knew that, I'd sort of honed this instrument, because that's what you do at drama school for 3 years. You're creating this instrument for feeling and responding and um, creativity. And so I was kind of already sort of primed for the perfume world in a way that I didn't realize. And then I suddenly thought, oh, there's this stream of everything I've been working on, this level of sensitivity and responsiveness and alertness and awareness and sort of just pursuing different lines of inquiry creatively. And then I was like, oh my god, actually perfume really is quite similar to that. because with Anastasia, we were creating bespoke perfumes. And it was, starting from scratch. You could have someone who came in and said they didn't like smells. And we did have one guy who said, don't like smells. It's like going on a date and someone says to you, "Oh, I don't like films," or "I don't like animals." And you're like, oh my God. So it was really, yeah, interesting that we could sort of find a way to profile people who were very time poor as well. So it was kind of, the who's who of the industry. We had Richard Branson coming in and Marilyn Manson and India Hicks and this roll call of people. And we, in a very short space of time, we needed to use different approaches, which I still use now, like color therapy, and we had a psychologist. And so there'd be very detailed approaches to how do we drill down into the essence of a person and connect that to a scent.
Yeah, that's really interesting because scent is such a unique way and a really good way to try and get to know a person, isn't it, and understand their character.
Exactly. And I think that it um it's almost like you see the shifts happening, you witness them in people, and you can see how they're changed. And very often, it's that Alexander technique approach that we don't actually know what we're doing a lot of the time. So it's really helpful to have another trained pair of eyes. And we use this technique in the shop a lot, just watching how people are altered by the different scents. And maybe they come alive and they're a bit brighter in themselves and a bit brighter in their own perception. And then we're like, "Oh, I'm just going to bring you back to that because when you tried that, something happened to you." And then, so you're really having to read someone in response to perfume. And so there is an intuitive aspect, which definitely links with acting as well, because all acting is reacting and you're working with others and ensemble and very much in the now.
Yeah, and there's becomes this point where the perfume work overtakes the acting work, and you move into the industry and you start working there full time and make it your career. But you also then make this quite bold decision to start your own brand under your own name, which is obviously Nancy Meiland, the brand. What was the
Yeah.
catalyst for you there? What made you decide, "Do you know what, this is what I want to do? I want to have my own thing"?
I think I had already learnt a lot in the perfume world, and I felt very deeply connected to naturals, and I'd already done my own qualifications in perfume with senior perfumer Mike Evans at Quest. So he was working with Anastasia and I for a while, and I already felt that I was already starting in my headspace to kind of assemble different perfumes, and they were just sort of sitting up there. And I just sort of thought, well, the kids, I had my gorgeous daughter Lilla, and then my son Heath, and he was still a babe in arms. So I had a 2-year-old, and I had a babe in arms, Heath, and I just thought, I just had one of those moments where everything's sort of went quiet, and I thought, no, 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 I have to actually start doing this. I've got them in my head, and they need to be pulled down, and I need to pull the metaphor through, and it become a thing in the real world because I think people would be really interested in this. So that's how it began, and I have to say, although I curse it every day, my smartphone and but actually without the smartphone, I wouldn't have been able to do the babies. And then when they were playing and happy or quiet or napping, I would just do one email a day, and I just really genuinely, Thomas, built it up stone by stone. Day by day, email by email, but very much knowing that this is the right direction for me.
And you launched, was 3 fragrances you launched with, wasn't it?
So I launched with Acalaria,
Yep.
Illumine, and Rosier, which were co-created with perfumer Mattia Naldin in Grasse, because luckily I had quite a few connections in Grasse already. So I just went over and was kind of like, look, I've got this idea and that idea, and really keen to lift off with some of these. And just again, absolutely no idea, groping in the dark, no idea where it was going to lead me, where it was going to go. But was so sure that there was something here to pursue for me. There was something that would be really rewarding.
And Aquilari is one of the fragrances I'd like to talk about because that was, you know, one of the sort of early oud fragrances, and it's a really unique take on oud because I find it, oud can sometimes be really punchy and aggressive almost, whereas Acalaria is this really soft, soothing, velvety oud. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process of creating that fragrance? Because obviously it's one of your first, so I'm really intrigued how
Is
that experience was for you working with Mathieu and creating one of your first
Yeah,
fragrances.
I think that it goes back to one of your earlier questions about moments where I've smelt something that's completely molecularly changed me, cellularly, I've just felt at root level. And I was working with Anastasia and she had some genuine oud. She had a beautiful library of scents. And then often I was sort of required to sort of decant them and label them and tidy them up. And I just so I wasn't primed for it. I wasn't being presented with genuine oud. I just stumbled across it. So I was filling and tidying I was completely arrested by it. I just thought, this is unbelievable. And it's almost like a symphony of things, and you couldn't possibly want for anything more in a sense than all of these things happening at once. The violet facet, the warmth, the golden accord, there's just so much to it. And I really had no idea that you could be filled like this, because we all walk around with holes within that we try and use different things to fill. And I thought, oh my God, it actually works to fill you, this, and make you feel complete. So it was a feeling. And I guess it was a feeling of wholeness. And so I thought, well, I'm going to work with that. And also, I couldn't understand because the name of the tree that Acalaria is derived from, and they tap the tree, and the tree knows when a storm is coming and produces the sap, was Acalaria. And I thought, God, it's so beautiful. I mean, the name, the word, the name, and how that scanned. So I really wanted to kind of pick up on that as well and kind of make it an origin story. So not just an ode to oud, haha, but also like an origin story of like, well, what would it be like if you were standing inside the tree of its origin? And how would that feel? And also this amazing sort of rich tapestry that it has with other colours, creeds, religions, globally and cultures. It's just, the list goes on. Everybody's got a very deep connection with oud. And like you say, we only sometimes get part of the story because it combines very well with rose, that we know, and they're like ideal bedfellows. But sometimes I think it's nice to sort of reflect it differently, I think.
Yeah, so it sounds like you went into that with a really strong idea of what you wanted to create. The concept was
Yeah.
really well realized. What was it like then doing that fragrance development with Mathieu and trying to get to, for your first time, where you wanted to get to with it?
It was kind of thrilling because we were sort of co-informing each other and it felt very symbiotic as a process. So we were bouncing ideas off each other. He was really interested in using something called Cuban cascarilla oil, which I didn't know about beforehand, but I've always been really into the smells of smoking paraphernalia, and I love like the empty cigar box. So yeah, if you wonder where I am, I've probably got an empty cigar box on my head, sort of in front of my face. Um, but basically, there were all these different kind of notes that we were sort of experimenting to try and capture this origin story and the sense of the tree in its fullness and the source of oud. But yeah, so we were bouncing back and forth a lot about story. It was thrilling because it was suddenly happening. And I thought, wow, this is really exciting. And and I just thought the momentum was there.
And it yielded beautiful, beautiful results.
Yeah, yeah. It's still one of our top sellers. And honestly, Thomas, no word of a lie. Don't believe the hype, as they say. But it's true that people come into the shop and sometimes they are really struck emotionally by it. So, we were talking about that feeling of wholeness. I do witness that in people. So I have just been part of, Matthew and I have been part of sharing that with others, that experience of wholeness through the oud.
And that's a really beautiful thing to be able to bring to people, I think.
Isn't it? It
Yeah.
feels like that.
And one of the things that's always really struck me about your fragrances is how they feel so rooted in the natural world. The concepts of you're usually playing with the idea of a material or, a particular scene or place. And, even looking at the visual identity of the brand, it's very, I don't want to say earthy, feels a bit like reductive. It's not earthy, but it just feels like it's rooted in nature. It feels natural. What is usually your starting point for a fragrance? Where do you start?
I think for me, the natural world is just a rich theme of inspiration. It always has been. It still is. Um, Also, I really wanted to create a collection where we were actually connected with that, because I was talking about, how we feel very whole when we're in nature too, and we can also feel revived by it, and inspired by it. And so I wanted a collection that would reflect that, and exalt nature through these stories. Maybe just taking a tiny freeze frame, of an early morning dew forming on the rose petal, or it could be, sort of like in Lupin Meadow, it could be the sort of warm summer meadows. So I think, we are surrounded, whether directly or not, by nature, and it's our home. Um, and I think that it can really feed us, in terms of how we feel, and how it inspires us.
I suppose it's also a really relatable thing for people, isn't it? Because it's not abstract, it's real. People can understand a fragrance that is evoking woodland, they can understand one that's evoking the coast or
Yeah,
any other kind of part of nature. Or even if you're bringing, and I know you do in your collection, maybe fragrances inspired by places of the world that people smelling them may not have visited. You can still, because they are rooted in nature, you can still relate to them, and I think that's important.
definitely. And I think what's nice about using nature as your muse is that it means everything is cracked wide open in terms of how people decide to interpret that for themselves. Because um, I think that there should be a spaciousness with concepts, so that people, like, it's really great to pin things down and be really precise too, and say it's this, 100% is this, but actually, and sometimes that can embolden people when they wear it, etc. But I think if there's enough mystery as well, and I do try to create that within the compositions of the collection, just that there's always something unfolding, maybe something unexpected, um, that it's not just ABC, or it's this, and then people say, "Oh, you smell like that," cassis, or one thing. And there's absolutely no rules. We know this, and what I love about perfume is that there are no rules. And I'm constantly surprised by new things that come on the market, and I'm always trying to sort of not fall into a safe harbor with what I'm smelling all the time, but actually, you know keeping really wide open perceptively.
I think the idea of unexpectedness is something that really sticks out for me within the collection. They're always quite unique because they always have a subversive twist on a well known theme or material. I'm thinking actually in particular about one of my favourites, which is Galantia, which I love for summer, which is this gorgeous hot white tropical floral with this strange marine sort of coastal Nordic cool twist. And I feel like whatever you do,
Mm.
it's not literal always. It's trying to give something, a little bit of excitement and something unexpected. Is that something you deliberately set out to do, to kind of subvert expectations in that way?
I don't know if I set out to do that, but I think that when I'm using nature as an inspiration, often it does move in that direction, because there becomes a mysterious part of that and a sort of enigma to it. And the magic of that is somehow what I'm pursuing in terms of the inspiration, whether it's in Sous Bois, which was very much like underneath the canopy, and very steamy petrichor. Um, and that was in the Highlands. We were on a family holiday in the Highlands, and I was there and thinking, oh my God, this is like pure forest bathing, and Sous was sort of very much born from that. I think, yeah, it can be yeah, really sort of, I do like to sort of have a maverick twist to things. I think it's really important to kind of keep people on their toes and keep people guessing. And I, as I was saying to you, I love linear perfumes, but it's not really what I tend to make. I don't tend to make a linear perfume. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just I really love when there's an arc of things and there's a journey on the skin and it's doing different things at different points, and it also does different things at different points for different people. So the same perfume will just unfold completely differently. And I always use a lot of naturals to ensure that that happens, because my background in naturals pretty much ground that in as a practice. And it was very much about how can you create something that would be unique in to everyone and their expression of it, which connected again with the bespoke side of perfume that I was working with originally. I wanted everyone to have that experience, for it to sort of unfold differently on everybody. So that unique telling on everyone, I really love that. That's what gets me up in the morning as well.
Yeah, because everybody comes to it differently and they interpret it really differently as well, doesn't they? They take away different elements of the fragrance
Yeah,
as their kind of favorite or the bit that resonates with them. So everybody gets a different
yeah,
experience.
yeah. It's really and truly a celebration. I mean, perfume is so many things, but it's because it's quite shapeshifty, but it's such, and it really is an expression of the individual. It celebrates the individual, um, because we all have such a unique experience of it. And then on the nose and on the skin, things are unfolding so uniquely.
One of the things that I'm sort of picking up from there is that storytelling is a huge part of what you do with each of your fragrances. You're trying to tell a story, and you reference about being in the Highlands and sort of capturing those moments. Are you sort of always collecting stories around you when you go? You're thinking, oh, okay, I need to store this moment for a later time because that could be a perfume.
Think so. I quite like the idea of, like, how would you describe these smells to an alien? Like if they were a Martian visiting, like how are you going to like help them download that? How are you going to offer that and say, well, it's like this? And probably how you would do it with them, I don't know, because I've never met one, not recently, but is to actually do it by feeling. And so you would kind of go, it's that. Or another way of expressing the feeling or whatever, not necessarily even words. Because words can be quite confusing. Sometimes they can be a bit intimidating as well in perfume, or they can be jargony or whatever. But actually, you're really, if you strip everything away, is the feeling, isn't it? And we're communicating the feeling to others. Sommeliers do it with wine as well. So it's a really beautiful sort of process. But yeah, I always like to kind of keep a sort of mental notebook and snapshots of different moments in nature and different things. Um, and then hopefully they will sort of inform my work at different points.
Yeah, and that absolutely comes through. It's all powered by feeling. You have these really beautiful reference points, these strong ideas with really beautiful storytelling, and then you obviously work with perfumers at different houses like Robertet, etc., to help sort of realize these concepts that you have.
Yeah.
And you sound like such a sensorial person. You talk about visual references and things like that. I wonder what that briefing process looks like between you and the perfumer. How do you brief them?
I like to use visuals because, again, it's like if you're trying, in order to make something unique and new, you sort of have to make it abstract again. Does that make
Mm,
any sense? So you'll
yeah.
have a very common universal experience, but then you have to make it abstract and objectify it and go, well, if I break it down, what is that? Like even with bad smells, they can have good smells within them, for example. Always saying to the kids, like, oh, that stinks, mum. I'm like, yeah, but what in it stinks? What in it stinks? There's probably a good thing in there, and there's also a bad thing. So again, it's like that constant objectivity. So then you've got this thing that, like a kind of still life in a painting, you're trying to highlight and accentuate and draw out some of those qualities that you're really interested in pursuing as a line of inquiry. So I use visuals, I use descriptions. I mean, yeah, I like working with different perfumers, I have to say, because I think it sort of just brings a kind of freshness into things rather than that it was the same one through everything. But that's fine too. But I think we find our sort of personal way of working. I quite like working with the different perfumers and their different influence, and kind of seeing how it can all still marry up as one collection at the end.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about it that way, because I know some brands do like to work with one perfumer, not just because it gives, maybe a house signature, but because you have to, with each person, I suppose, build up that common language between you. So when Nancy says, I want it a certain way, that perfumer then understands what that
Can
means.
interpret it.
Yeah, it can interpret it. But I
Yeah.
suppose in a way, is that part of the excitement for you, is having that experience with different people?
Yeah, and maybe afresh as well.
Hmm.
So perhaps we're not leaning into something that's known about our relationship, or they're not leaning into any expectation from our track record of, oh, we made this last time, and this is, again, like you say, this is what Nancy would want, blah blah blah. I think i think obviously I sort of want to bring together a collection that feels knowable to people. But at the same time, like you were saying, even within the, like we were talking about with each individual fragrance, not people not necessarily knowing exactly what's going to happen. Like, it's not like an ABC telling that there might be something different that happens at a certain moment that's surprising. That surprise element that needs to happen within the collection as well. Do you see what I mean? So it works
Hmm.
out from the perfume bottle, and within the collection, you also need to have a few things there that are kind of like, gosh, wasn't expecting that. I was kind of being led along this scent journey by my amazing team in the store, and then suddenly they're sort of like, oh, that was something a bit different. So I think the element of surprise, it comes from the magic of nature, and because there's so much surprise, isn't there? You work on a garden and suddenly something's burst into bloom and you think, wow, what's that? Wasn't expecting that. Or a scent or whatever, an aroma that's occurred naturally. um so yeah, lots of inspiration in that way. But I think you are right that there is an element of surprise that is important. But I think it naturally finds its way there. Does that make any sense? Rather than me starting out with, let's do something a little
Yeah.
bit shocking, or
Yeah, it,
you
it
know.
does. It does make sense, and I think also, if you're working with lots of different perfumers, you're developing your skill in a way, because you're experiencing it. Working with different people. But I think also it helps you think. In the future, you might think, oh, remember I worked with Julie Laurent on Lupin Meadow, and you might have a concept in the
Amazing.
future that you think, do you know what? That's a perfume that I would put with
Mm,
Julie to create, or here's one that I would think
totally.
Matthew would completely understand. That's his area. And it's not always about style, is it? Sometimes you just know the
Mhm.
concept that would, or the a material that might tickle their funny bones in a way, because perfumers are just
Yeah.
just basically problem solvers and nerds, from my
Yeah,
experience. So
totally. Yeah. And organizers. I'm
yeah.
always saying, like, massive nerdy organizers. Yeah. Labeling everything,
Yeah.
everything's compartmentalized, isn't it? And
Yeah.
but yeah, 1,000%. It's really interesting. From working with Anastasia, where it was all about the bespoke world and creating signature scent for a client, and that was all about conveyancing almost. So it was like, oh, how can we connect a perfumer with this person? And that's kind of what was going on. It's like, I know the person who can work with you because you don't like smells, but you do like the smell of motorcycle grease. Okay, we know the person for you. So
Yeah.
yes, it's sort of knowing, but without being limiting either, because
Mm.
because also what you got to remember is that whoever made one of the perfumes, maybe it's a really splash and wear fresh floral like Lupin Meadow, but maybe they're crying out to make something with a bit more Scandi noir drama.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they
Absolutely.
want
They
to
don't want
make
to be in a box,
something.
do they? Yeah.
Exactly, because nobody does. So yeah, there's that kind of like flexibility as well. And yeah, so again, it's about sort of always kind of trying to create balance, but not playing safe either.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Now, I want to talk to you a bit about your most recent launch, which came out, I think, towards the end of last year, which was Iris Nebula. Who was this? Who did you work with on this one to create this one?
So it was Mathieu Menevier, and he has been. I just think it's stunning. wanted something that was kind of a love potion within the collection because, again, perfume is a lot of things, but I really thought we needed a love note and something kind of celestial, almost kind of like twin flame vibes, where something's happened on a higher level, cosmic level, and there's been a sort of celestial union. And I wanted something really kind of skin like as well and close with that. And also kind of spice. I'm a huge lover of the iris, so that's been in the back of my head for a long time. But I wanted to kind of create a spicy gourmand take on the iris with that hint of violet powder and caramel, almost creme brulee towards the end. And I think that Mathieu has done an amazing job on it. I'm super in love with it. Um, and it is sort of like what I would wear kind of in the evening, and I kind of feel put together, but not too much. Sort of like classy, fun, but not too like rah, shouty.
If you're listening to this and you love iris or orris, you have to try this fragrance. I think it is one of the most beautiful iris fragrances ever created, and I'm not being hyperbolic there. When it came out, I think I said as much to you that I was just blown away by it because it is such an unusual take on iris. So you have this lovely, very mineral, earthy, rooty, carroty, violety iris, which is kind of what we're used to. But then this glitteriness to it. It does smell sparkly and a little bit suede-like. There's a softness, a sensuality to it. And then as you get into it, you're like, wait, hold on a second. Is that some salted caramel in the background there that's just coming through? And you're like, oh my God, it is. And you're right about it saying it's quite dressed up and glam, but also it's very approachable. It's not standoffish. It's not iris because it's a bit cool. It can be a bit mean, kind of. It can be a bit sharp, bit earthy, bit rooty, bit gravestone,
and it can
bit
be more
Miss
of a
Havisham.
statement than an invitation, whereas this feels like it's sort of letting you in somehow. It's like it's reaching a hand out. It's got it's honestly, we've been so blown away by the response to this one, and we're just really hugely grateful for it. But it also just really completes the collection for now, as best as it can. But underscore for now. But yeah, I think it's just been a really beautiful addition, and it's meant a lot of things to different people, and also very genderless as well. Most because of the balance in a lot of my compositions, that they do tend to appeal across all genders. So
the name is so evocative and such a beautiful name. Was that name always there for you, or did that come later in the process? Because it's like it's the perfect name. Yeah, it's the perfect name.
I know. No, it's just I'm so sorry, but everything in my life feels very almost predestined, and I get these mad moments, and everyone who works for me knows that this is how I live and what happens. But I literally just sort of had it pop into my head, and then I knew that I was interested in creating an iris within the collection, and then I looked it up, and it was a constellation. It's the constellation.
Wow.
And then I thought, well, there you go. It's a cosmic iris. There you go. Et voila. So it was just like a little scented meringue falling down from the clouds as a gift. And that is honestly how a lot of it happens. I think because your antennae are so open in those lines of inquiry, you just get lots of different impressions come in, feed in, and it continues, really.
Iris Nebula really stands out as something new, a really new olfactory concept. To me, when I wear it, I don't know why, but I feel like I imagine a really beautiful piece of cashmere. So like very expensive, very well styled, very chic, very cool. There is a kind of like a coolness to it that I like and that I think is really, really striking. One part of your brand that we need to explore before you go that we haven't talked about is the bespoke scenting experience that you do. Is the bespoke signature scenting. Tell me a bit about that, because I imagine, coming from your history, that's the kind of thing that you really love doing, just getting into the real nitty gritty of a person and trying to create an individual attar for that individual.
Absolutely. And it's really close to my heart that I still do this, because although I work with other perfumers, I really like to create myself, and I create just using naturals, mainly because I don't need access to a lab, and I just have the naturals in store in my Brighton studio, and people will come in for their 2-hour session, and we'll be able to kind of sort of zero in on exactly what the essences they're looking for and also the essence of them. So yeah, I love that kind of intuitive work where you're working one to one with people, and then how they get surprised by things, and how you learn something as well, and it feels like a journey together. But yes, so when we've hit on a perfume that someone really loves and it's sort of striking at the core of them, and we then will keep a record of it and they can reorder it in future. And it's sort of stored in a vault with the pearls, as I like to joke, which is my laptop. But I really, you know, what I found in terms of refining processes, I found it really important that um, I have the person with me from start to finish. So sometimes, historically, I would have done like a back and forth and kind of like, oh, you know, but then pulling someone back into the perfume world when they were so immersed in it in that moment is quite tough to do, actually. So I've been getting people in for 2 hours and then just doing it in 2 hours, which is why it's a slightly cheaper price point, because you're not kind of buying my headspace for 6 months. It's more of a kind of focus kind of experience. And also I can use their skin, which for naturals is so key. And in a way, it's me tinkering away is kind of theoretical, isn't it, if the person isn't there and I can't try things on their skin and see how it's responding. So the naturals kind of tell me where we're going and the responses of the client. But it does feel like really intuitive work, and it's also the ultimate luxury, I think, to have your own scent. I don't think it's always important to people, and you know, there's so much choice now. But I think there is just something about the fact that you made it together, and you'll always have this memory.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to have, and a great conversation starter to talk about your own signature scent. And what I would suggest is, obviously you can read all about that on your website, but if you're ever down in Brighton, you have to go and visit Nancy's boutique. It's so beautiful, and it just, you walk in and you will go in and you'll go, I completely understand Nancy Meiland immediately, because it is such a warm, inviting, beautiful experience. And you can see all of the fragrances there, the body products that you have. Sometimes you have a dish, kind of limited edition ceramic bottles and things I think I've seen down there,
Yeah,
which are really,
correct.
really
And
gorgeous.
we're going to have different extras as well that you can only buy in store quite soon, because we want to sort of have a few things that you can't get anywhere else. So that will be quite interesting to work with as well, that can be decanted right in store for you. So that's the idea that we're moving towards now.
It's
But
beautiful.
yeah, it is so lovely to have a home for everything. And like, I started selling the perfumes when they were made in fields, and I was standing in fields in wellies. My kids running around at different fairs, and I have huge nostalgia for that. I call them the
Mm.
lugging years, because I was sort of lugging children or lugging bags sort of around the country with different things, and um, it's all got huge value. And I've very much built this very slowly, kind of stone by stone, leaf by leaf. You know, it's literally. But what's great about that is it's kind of, it feels real. You know, it's not
Mm.
just about, oh, this is the next big thing, and it's
Mm-mm.
grown in a really real way, about based on true responses to perfume and people coming back, and that just fills me with joy, and I feel super grateful to be part of that whole process.
Yeah, I can see why. It's a really beautiful thing to be a part of. Now, I do have to let you
Yeah.
go, I'm afraid, Nancy, which I really don't want to do. But before I do, I- is there anything you can share about what you're working on now? What's next for Nancy Myland?
Well, a girl doesn't kiss and tell, but maybe she does. Maybe she does. But yeah, I do really like the idea of a gourmand coming into play at
Mm.
some point soon. So, again, I keep half an ear on fragrance trends and what things are going on, but really, I'm trying to curate a collection that kind of works together as a scent journey. So it's really that's foremost in my mind, but a gourmand would be just incredible. So yeah, I've been in a very puddingy world recently of just extremely decadent dishes, and just sampling of this, that, and the other to try and kind of inform where we'll go with that. But I'm very excited for what's to come.
Yeah, me too, because I don't think there's anything better than a puddingy world. I think that's the world we want to live in.
Oh, let's stay in our puddingy worlds.
Nancy, it's been an absolute joy and a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Really a pleasure too. Thank you.
It's always such a joy to speak to Nancy. I think she's created such a wonderful brand. It feels earthy, warm, and inviting. I actually visited her boutique in Brighton last summer, and I felt that's where the brand really clicked for me. It's a beautifully designed space that possesses all the warmth and beauty of the Nancy Meiland brand, and sniffing the fragrances in situ there really enhanced the experience for me. I walked away with one of my favourites, Eglantier, which I proceeded to rock the shit out of all summer, I'll be honest. I highly recommend a visit. And Nancy will also be at Barnes Fragrance Fair this May, on May the 16th. So do pop along and get to know her and her fragrances. Now, if you want to know more about Nancy, you can visit her website, nancymeiland.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at Nancy Meiland Parfums. I'll put those details in the show notes for you, as I always do. Yeah, you get it. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another exciting new episode. One clue, Daddy's here. That's all you're getting. A massive thank you to Carium, our sponsor for this episode. I'm all about making fragrance and fragrance discovery more accessible, and Carium's innovative AI solution, the Scent Sommelier, offers an entirely new way to explore fragrance by translating scent into language. You can find out more at carium.com. As usual, I'll hand over to our guests to tell us the fragrance they have an emotional connection with. After all, fragrance is an emotional art form. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can at Making Sense Make Sense. But for now, over to Nancy for the final words.
A fragrance I have an emotional connection with is Jean-Claude Hellena's L'Eau d'Hiver. And I remember being pregnant with my second born and being in Paris and trying it as part of the Frederic Malle collection. And I felt really moved. I felt the fragility of it. And I thought, oh God, can a fragrance really be this fragile and have is the metric really strength? Is maybe the metric presence and nuance? And there was a lot happening there with that. And it had heliotrope in it, and it kind of gave you this kind of skin-like, water-like fragility, and it felt very human. And I just thought, oh, I feel seen and understood by a perfume. What's going on there? That was definitely a line of inquiry.